changed my lament into a whirling dance. He ripped up my sad black mourning band. He dressed me with joy and filled me with song. I can't stop drinking, my guts so strong. The wine is alive. It's Jesus Christ.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Abba podcast with John McDonald. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. John would love to hear from you. You can send comments and questions on Twitter at Abba Podcast. You can also keep in touch through the Facebook page, the Abba Podcast with John McDonald. Podcast episodes can be downloaded from Podbean, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify and many of the usual platforms. If the Abba Podcast isn't on your favourite platform, let us know and we'll get it sorted. Here's your host, John McDonald.
Well, folks, it's my great pleasure to have Godfrey Birtill with me. Godfrey has been called a prayer minstrel, a troubadour, a worship leader, prophetic, and probably some other names as well, but we'll leave that aside. Godfrey, it's really is my pleasure to welcome you to the Abba podcast. Welcome.
Great to be with you. Yeah, looking forward to our chat. In Bonnie, Scotland, all the way down to Cornwall, yeah.
I know, the wonders of the internet, the modern age.
Yeah.
As I said there, people have called you a troubadour, a prayer minstrel, all worship leader. How would you describe yourself, Godfrey?
That's a funny one. I mean, I did get that name minstrel from Roger Mitchell, I remember.
Right, Roger.
I remember him sort of saying that. He said, "You're not a worship leader, Godfrey, you're a minstrel." And it kind of summed it up in some ways, although it gives you visions of wearing a sort of hat with bells on.
With the lute.
Court jester, yeah. Which I am, I guess, sometimes. But I would always say, really, I'm a journalist. My background, I was a press photographer for 20 odd years before coming away from that job and doing what I'm doing now, which is living by faith for 20 odd years.
Wow.
But I believe I still have that journalist kind of way of looking at things with what I'm doing as a songwriter. I write
That's
songs.
Really interesting.
I write what I'm seeing God doing, what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing through the Holy Spirit or through conversations like this, and there'll be like a snapshot that I might hear one sentence, one word even, and the way the songs happen is it's like taking them into the dark room, if you like, to use that analogy, the old school photography, which is what I grew up in, and developing it, and that's how the songs generally happen.
Yeah, none of this newfangled digital stuff.
Oh no.
You're a purist.
I use an iPhone now. I do pictures every day here in Cornwall, I left the proper cameras behind ages ago, although I sometimes think about getting back into black and white photography, I just love that medium, it's great.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, some of the black and white stuff is stunning. And then you see it in colour and it just doesn't have the same effect. Yeah,
well, the heavy papers, what we call the heavies, the bigger, the broadsheets, used black and white for ages and ages and ages, and their pictures were always very powerful. It was filling half the page, in a black and white image. If it was in colour, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
There are some images that are so powerful in black and white.
It's kind of like some of your writing. It's you paint a picture, but it's not stark. Stark's not the right word. But it hits you like a black and white photograph does.
I guess so.
But it hits you in the heart.
Right.
With just some of the way you put it,
Yeah, I've been, I often think about songwriting, and songwriting these days and stuff, and sometimes I'm asked by young people, which is great, I love to be an encouragement to people, but what I've often said to them is don't try to write a song. I think there's a danger sometimes in trying to write a worship song, because it can end up being something contrived. And also, there's a lot of focus, I think, sometimes in songwriting on the melody, like get a catchy melody, you know, and then cherry pick words that have already been sung and stick them in there. Do you know what I mean? So I really feel that we need to be hearing songs that aren't cherry picked words. What I have it for myself, and I believe every songwriter needs, is someone like my wife, Jill. When I've written a song, I play them to her, and she kind of identifies anything that has been hammered phrase-wise in the church. She just say that phrase there, it's been absolutely drained. And it, you know, it teaches me to kind of not write what's already been written, if you know what I mean. Wow. I mean, sometimes it's okay with bits of old hymns and things like that, or complete old hymns, you know, but in writing songs, really it should come out of not cherry picking stuff, you know, that we've sung over and over again, but what are you actually seeing, you know, and so on, you know, that it should come through that, almost like a journalist. And it doesn't matter if, to me, even if they're not grammatically perfect, you know, you know what I mean? To me, it's just, it's almost like a feeling. Yeah. You know, I've sometimes tried to correct a song that I felt's not quite grammatically right, and I've, you know, played it to Jill when it wasn't quite spot on, and then tried to correct it, took it back to her, and she's kind of said it's lost something, and I've had to go back to where it's not perfect.
Yeah.
You
well,
know?
I mean, people don't always speak grammatically correct, do they? You know, exactly. So I suppose it's like writing in the vernacular.
Yeah, and it's the heart, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if I often find you can tell if a song's got life, you'll know it while you're writing it.
Yeah.
If you're just writing a song, I mean, I don't want to be critical, but there are groups of people in certain places, like Nashville or whatever, you know, that get together to write Christian hits. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which is fine. But then it's again, like really the big deal is the melody. Is it a catchy melody? You know, and then stick a few cherry-picked words in, like I'm saying, you know, which is fine in the nice songs, but I always liken those to cans of Coke. You know, there's loads of Coke, you know, it's everywhere. It tastes the same, looks the same. But I always try to kind of get across to young writers and that, don't write cans of Coke. You know, we've got enough pop music. Write wine songs. Wine's different. Wine comes from an area. It's got a uniqueness. You know, write the songs of the new wine. You know,
that's fun. Yeah, but it's funny you were saying that about pop music, because that's what was going through my head. Yeah. Like Pete Waterman and all those kind of guys sitting down to write formulaic songs.
Yeah.
Just because they'll be hits and make money.
Absolutely.
They're not really saying anything to the culture. They're not saying anything to the situation of the world. They're just making hits for reputation and money.
Yeah, I wouldn't accuse people of doing that, but
I'm talking about the pop world. That's the aim of it, you know.
You know, I don't think, whenever I've written a song, I don't think I've ever thought, you know, I'm doing this because it's going to be a hit or whatever. What sometimes have happened, like the song you mentioned just before when we first hooked up, the first song that kind of, for me, kind of started to be sung quite a lot was the song Outrageous Grace. And when I'd written that song, I wrote it in the morning, and Jill was still in bed, and I went to play it to her, and I sat on the bed and just, what do you think of this song? You know, with a lot of pain, a lot more healing, blah, blah, blah. Got to the chorus, oh, outrageous grace, and we both fell about laughing. Every time we got to the chorus, we were just, we were, I'm not kidding, she like fell out of bed laughing. We were laughing so much, like the verses, fine. The chorus, boom, you know, like released a laughter and a joy. And it identified to me there's something on this.
Yeah.
And sure enough, when I played it to people, something happened. It wasn't always laughter. Sometimes people have been tears or you know, things like that.
The
There's a lot of pain, but a lot more healing. There's a lot of trouble, but a lot more peace. There's a lot of hate, but a lot more loving. There's a lot of sin, but a lot more grace. Oh, outrageous grace. Oh, outrageous grace. Love unfurled by heaven's hand. Oh, outrageous grace. Oh, outrageous grace. Through my Jesus, I can stand. There's a lot of fear, but a lot more freedom. There's a lot of darkness, but a lot more light. There's a lot of cloud, but a lot more vision. There's a lot of perishing, but a lot more life. A lot more life. Oh, outrageous grace. Oh, outrageous grace. Love unfurled by heaven's hand. Oh, outrageous grace. Oh, outrageous grace. Through my Jesus, I can stand. There's an enemy that seeks to kill what it can't control. It twists and turns, making mountains out of molehills. But I will call on the Lord, who is worthy of praise. I run to
So it's not, if you get what I'm saying, I'm not just into writing a song.
Yeah.
And that's why I work with Jill, because she identifies, has it something on this of the Spirit of God,
Wow.
It's not just a song we're singing, it actually does something.
Well, she certainly has good discernment, because most all of the stuff I've heard of yours has got something on it.
That's you. And she's not a singer either. She doesn't sing in tune. She's not a musician. And yet she can identify a song better than I can.
She hears the Spirit much clearer.
I think it's the working together, isn't it? It's
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's the wonderful thing you're saying there, is that you don't just do this in isolation, like this is Godfrey's. It's something that's shared with you and Jill, but then you share it with the world.
Well,
it's incredible.
Where it goes, it goes. I think it was Darlene Chet said, "A good song will have legs."
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we've been, not many years ago now, but we were going through something, and it was your song Breakout.
Oh, right, yeah.
That really, really helped us through that period of we were sensing the leading of the Spirit, but it was a bit scary, as it sometimes is. And that song just kept speaking to us over and over. Every time we played that CD, we're like, yeah, we hear you. Do we have to do it? It's like, but that song was so precious, and still is for us, because it really spoke deeply into our situation, and we heard the Spirit in the song.
Yeah, that was from the late 90s, when I was with Dale Gentry, a guy from Texas, and that is really his message. We've got to break out. And there was something on what he was saying at that time, particularly, that, and I did break out. That's that time I left my job and started doing what I was doing. Just leapt off the edge. And got myself a breakout. So it was all like part of that, really. That it came through that. So, and I think the chorus, I can hear now Dale shouting, "Break out! You need a breakout!" And so the chorus is breakout. And that's how it kind of came about. So Dale was very much a strong influence on that song, back then.
Break out! This is the time to break out! This is the call to break out! This is the year of the breakout! Hey! So break out! This is the time to break out! This is the call to break out! This is the year of the breakout!
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because were you writing songs and playing music while you were a journalist, or was that just something that began?
Well, I was like a worship pastor at a church, a Free Methodist church and stuff like that, looking after a worship team and stuff, and doing my job, and I'd write the odd song at those times, and but I'd say they weren't really corporate songs. They weren't. There's perhaps songs that you just sit and listen to, and I try to bring them to the congregation at the very patient and kind Free Methodist Church. And it was in the days of overhead projectors, with lights and stuff. And I used to write these songs and write them out by hand, and then put them on. And as I do a few normal songs, while I was leading worship, and then I'd bring one of my songs, and it was almost like they kind of knew it was one of mine. One reason was it didn't have a name of the writer on it. It just said anonymous. And then there was almost a feeling of, let's lift our hands and encourage him, because this song's dying,
Oh,
and, so I went through a few years of that, really. But it was at that breakout moment, I guess, where everything changed. When I wrote Outrageous Grace, for example, I wasn't just writing a song, like I said before. When I wrote the chorus, so Outrageous Grace, it's going to sound a bit odd, this, but I heard like thousands of voices singing, I could hear it,
Wow.
and so that hadn't happened before, and that's when I started to write songs that became corporate, when I could hear a congregation actually singing them, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
That was a complete change to what I'd done before.
Yeah,
I
that's
wasn't just
incredible.
thinking, what can I write next? It was like connection with the Spirit of God, and what I'm, and all those other influences of what I'm seeing
Wow.
God doing today, what's happening in the church today, and the rest of it,
So what do you think it was that helped you to make that transition from writing those songs that were just listenable to songs that people embraced and
I think it was
sung?
a holy dissatisfaction. I think I was just so not happy with these songs I'd written. And I'll be honest, I wasn't happy in my job. I was like, it was turning into new technology. I started in my job as a darkroom printer in a darkroom for about 3 years, then a photographer. So, and it was black and white most of the time, and I
Yeah.
worked all over the country and stuff. Then when it went into Apple Macs, I felt like a dinosaur, So I was really unhappy with the transition to digital. I just felt I'm not in this. But it was like I say, a holy dissatisfaction, because I feel it was the Lord pushing me on and pushing me out of that. And I had to make that decision to leave, and left the job with a steady income. And no one had heard any of my songs or anything like that, but I took the step, and I took it with Jill, though. We agreed together, that we're going to do this. It's going to be tough, and it was very, very tough. There were some times we had hardly a penny to rub together, but we knew in our spirits it was right. We just knew we've got to do this. It's so right. God was all over it, and we were saying things in scripture like, I look after those who are young, and we had.
I was going to say, I mean, your family must have been quite young then, your daughter.
Well, then the youngest would have been, oh my goodness, that would have been, he would have been probably about 9 or 10, yeah.
Oh, so you had teenagers as well.
So
You had teenagers as well then.
yeah.
Well, that's even worse.
Well, yeah, I mean, people thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
They did, what are you doing? Because I was actually offered a sum of money from the newspaper that got through the union, the NUJ, because they felt my training hadn't been good. They were going to give me a lump sum as a payoff. And, but I felt the Lord say, don't take it. So I refused it.
Wow.
Because I felt the Lord saying, they owe you nothing. Come away, I'll look after you. And did that,
Wow, that's a very big step then, isn't it? Because it's a huge temptation to have this little nest egg or whatever.
Yeah, it was 10 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But 20 odd years ago, 10 grand was more than 10 grand is now.
yeah.
Wow.
But, I think when at that age or whatever, we were then, and I just knew it was right. If I'd stayed in that job, it would have killed me. Press photography is a young man's job anyway. I think you're chasing, everything's wanted yesterday, it's just constant stress, constant, now. So I was, like I say, just knew something had to shift here,
And I guess at that, approaching that time before you left, that would have been kind of entering the age of the paparazzi as well, where it was
just
all about celebrity photography and stuff,
Yeah, I left not long after the time of Princess Diana's death, actually. I left in March 98. Yeah.
Wow.
And it all changed from there. Little did I know, that what was ahead. Although in saying that, every morning I was writing down what I felt God was saying to me. I wrote it down. I still got the books now, little books. I still write down things. But back then, the things I was writing down were outrageous, because I felt the Lord was saying, you're going to be writing songs that are sung all over the world, and you're going to be traveling to America, South Africa, all these different places, Australia, New Zealand. And I'd never been anywhere like that. I had a fear of flying. I had a fear of airplanes.
Wow.
But I still wrote it down. And sure enough, within a few years, couple of years, all these things started happening, one after the other, you know. All these things I'd written down started to happen.
That's amazing.
And, but at the same time, I've also felt to stay true to what I felt he said to me. And I've never been really tempted to go for the big deal of being a star worship leader. If I felt, you know, not to be afraid to be out of the box.
Yeah.
I don't have to be liked.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's funny you saying that about.
I felt the lesson, be you. Don't try and be like somebody else, you know. Just be you, who you are, who I made you to be. Don't be like another Matt Redman or whatever, you know what I mean?
It's funny you saying that, because I read an interview with you and that Tony Cummins did, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And this is, I was laughing when he said this because I thought it's damning with faint praise. He said, Godfrey Birtill flies in the face of all those who believed that you had to be a good-looking teenager with soul survivor connections to become a nationally known worship leader and songwriter. Just when you were talking about that there, that reminded me of that quote from Tony Cummins.
That's right, Tony Cummins. Yeah, thank you, Tony. Yeah,
I thought I know what you're trying to say, Tony, but really,
bring a truth in that, I guess. Yeah. But you know, I've liked being a little. I enjoy it. I've not tried to be outside the box or whatever, as people say I am. You know, people say I'm left field, all the rest of it. Or when I used to lead worship at Grapevine, and that they always said I was Marmite. You know what I mean? You know, and people give me little cartons of Marmite and stuff. You know, and I've not tried to be Marmite. You know, it's just who I am. You know. I guess I am a little odd. But the good thing is, you know, I believe it's right if you be who you are.
But some of that is not necessarily a Christian thing. Some of that is the influences of your life, isn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah. And I had, to be honest, my youth was quite misspent. You know, I was in the band scene, in the drug scene. I ended up completely losing the plot. Actually ended up in needing psychiatric help. Ended up in the hospital in Scotland, actually, Crichton Royal. I don't know if it's still there.
No, it's not there now, but I think it's there now.
So that was, you know, quite a traumatic time to get through. And it was around about after that time when I was, had my first encounter with the Lord, you know, and sort of everything has changed from there, really, because I've not had those issues since. I was like set free from that, and but shortly after, I wanted to go back to hospitals, you know, to sing and stuff, but they wouldn't. I
remember reading about that with you.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me back in, you know. Until I wrote this song, I kept trying. They wouldn't let me in. Until I wrote this song, Do You Believe What I Believe About You? Which is like Father's heart towards humanity. You know, what are you believing about yourself? I'm not beating you up, you know. What are you, so why are you beating yourself up? It's that kind of song where Father's saying, you know, you're irreplaceable, you're unique. So speaking to people with suicidal tendencies, look, you're irreplaceable, you know, you're unique, you know. And
you believe what I believe about you. You are beautiful, so precious too. You're irreplaceable and unique, created for this intimacy, and forever we belong together. I say I think you're amazing. Oh, I say I think you're amazing. Oh, my love for you never changes. I say I think you're amazing.
That is a beautiful song.
So I put that on an album, and it just so happened that a young girl had been given the CD and had been playing that song, and the staff there reckoned it really helped her. And so they phoned me up just out of the blue and just said, about this song, and would you come in? Would you come in and play some of these songs to the patients? And so I did that. And from there on, and long story short, I've gone to quite a number of different hospitals and psychiatric wards, and some pretty heavy duty ones as well, secure wards, where they now allow me to go on them just with my guitar.
Wow.
They give me a toggle to pull if I get in trouble and stuff like that. But I found that more effective rather than doing a concert to sing sort of one-to-one,
Yeah, wow.
So often I'm singing to one person, do you believe it? Or I'm not disappointed in you, and things like that to them. And it's a wonderful privilege to be able to do that, really,
What kind of responses do you get from people doing that, Godfrey?
Well, there was one ward where they couldn't let me in, a secure ward, because there'd been a lot of trouble and violence in the ward. But I did say to them, I'd been in a ward like that when I was ill, would they allow me to go in? So they did allow me in. And sure enough, when I went in, there were people like lying on the floor, and I was crying, and there's all this. And I just started to play my guitar. Walking around just playing my guitar, and the atmosphere just shifted, to a light, from a heavy atmosphere to a light atmosphere, and one or two of them just smiling, as I looked into their eyes and stuff, and just you are beautiful, so precious too, you're irreplaceable and unique, just singing to them, singing God's thoughts towards them, which are good,
Yeah.
So things like that. And I had one guy in one secure unit who was like a bit like the big guy out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, yeah.
He was massive, this guy. Really big, scary guy, and but he sat in front of me, right face to face, while I was playing. And I sang directly to him. And the nurses came up to the staff, so you have no idea what just happened. We've never seen that with him. He doesn't communicate normally, but he talked to me.
Wow.
And they said he's missed out on his cigarette break, his fag break, cigarette break for many Americans. He's missed out on his cigarette break, and he will never do that. And in the psychiatric ward, a cigarette break is a big deal, because it's just a change of scenery. You go outside and have a cigarette or whatever, because of the smoke inside. So I thought that was interesting, that Father was just connecting with him, letting him know how beautiful he was, this awesome. big strapping guy. Yeah, so it's a privilege to be able to do that. And I think I had to wait 30 years, maybe more, before that door opened.
Wow.
But if I'd have done it earlier, it'd have been too soon.
Yeah.
I'd have gone in there with religion, probably. I'd have gone in there trying to get scalps, how many can I get today to make them say this little prayer or whatever,
Yeah.
And it was like, it was like the right time, because I went in there, it was like the Lord was showing me, just take my love in there, nothing else. Don't try and make them to get decisions. It's a big enough decision for half of them to get out of bed, Just show them my love, show them my compassion towards them and my love towards them. And that's how I do it. I don't try and make them Christians or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that I've been involved in ministries, and I've probably done it myself, where I've tried to force the issue, or I've seen the issue being forced. And you're right, it just...
I think if they see the love of God, if they encounter the love of God, I believe the Holy Spirit does the rest, I really believe that people who just spot that they are so loved, and that's when they encounter the love of Jesus, the reality of the finished work of the cross, what that actually means for them, and all of us.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because when you start to speak to them with that language about the cross and stuff, they're just like, what?
Yeah.
But when you start to speak the language of love,
Yeah.
it does something else, doesn't it?
Well, this is it. It's all about that. It's all about the greatest of these is love. Yeah.
Wow.
That is what communicates to people when they know they're so loved. Because most people, for example, well, most people anyway, but I'd say more so in psychiatric wards, don't believe they're lovable.
Wow.
That's and that. I remember my time when I was in a ward. I felt so disappointed in myself, and I felt I was a disappointment to my family and everything. You know, a big letdown. You know, I'm a family of 5 kids. I'm the youngest. You know, and just felt completely disappointment. And when I started, 30, 40 years later, going into the psychiatric wards, I felt that same spirit, if you like, of disappointment, that heaviness of disappointment. I just sense the Lord saying to tell them, I'm not disappointed. I don't do disappointment. I knew you before you were born.
Yeah.
Disappointment is a thing that we experience. It's more often not we're disappointed in ourselves. But when we look to the Lord and his heart for us, even when we messed up or whatever, I don't believe he's disappointed. He doesn't want us to be in a mess, but he's done something about the mess at Calvary, and I believe the Father would say, I'm not disappointed in you. So don't be disappointed in yourself. Let me lift that off you, and which is what he does. To see that happen, you see it in people's eyes when they've been set free from guilt and condemnation and beating themselves up. You see it. It's like a light comes on, boom, I'm free, and that's what the cross did, made us free. Jesus did it.
And of course, the psychiatric wards aren't the only place you've taken music.
Oh, no.
Tell us about Glory in the Pub.
Yeah. I felt very much that, pubs are where Jesus would go, because Jesus went where people are, the ordinary people, I think he'd be stood at the bar having a laugh with folk, I can really see that, and, Jesus is joy to me. He's not religious. He came to get rid of religion, Jesus is joy. He wants you to be yourself, to be you, And so I really felt the pub is a good place to go. Again, not going to get scalps,
Yeah.
but to introduce them to this Father God that loves them, no matter where they're at.
Yeah.
And I've seen things like, like there was one pub, the barmaid, for example, who didn't really want us there. She had completely turn her attitude around, and she was like, she just loved it. She looked forward to every time we were going,
Fantastic.
And whereas at first she was really opposed, thinking it was religion, don't want any religion.
How did the punters generally respond or react to what you were doing?
Well, sometimes there's quite a few folks that know the Lord and, are in a relationship with the Lord. So there's, but say there are people on the periphery that have just never had an encounter like that they know of anyway. That there'd be a mixture probably, and it'd be a curiosity. But I never got any sense of go away. We don't want you. I really feel that the pubs and stuff, well, the pubs are having a tough time right now. But I really feel that the pubs are places where there is such an openness to the love of God. People in pubs are great people. They're community people. Yeah. They love being in community,
Yeah.
And I believe the Lord loves that. The Lord loves communities, And, I've experienced like a pub in Ireland, for example, that didn't really want us to be there. They did a tour of some bars in Ireland, and there was, this was a really rough pub, like a really, really rough one, you know. But you know, they danced, you know, they loved the music and that, and it was just a great atmosphere. You know? And so, yeah, I think the music is a good way to preach the gospel without it kind of being sort of, are you trying to ensnare me into something?
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what
it's
I mean?
interesting, you know, had you gone in there with traditional worship songs, would they
Sorry?
have received, had you gone in there with traditional worship songs,
Right.
would they have received it
They
the
might
same
have
way?
smelled
I'm
of
not so
that,
sure.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, I sing stuff like The Wine is Alive, you know.
Ah.
They like that, you know.
But I mean, I've seen you play a number of times, obviously.
Sorry?
I've seen you play a number of times,
All
and
right.
you don't do a nice like la 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 Jesus. You know, that's not your style.
Well, I can, you know, I love it all, really. I'm a big music fan anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I do love the gentle and I love the connecting, you know, and the worship thing too, you know. But like I said, as Roger Mitchell said all that time ago, I am more of a minstrel. I'm looking at people, you know. You know, I'm not like that. I'm looking at the band. I can regard the congregation as the band, you know. So I'm looking at them.
That's awesome.
And seeing, are we connecting? You know, there's no point being like that if everybody else is like, you know.
What's he doing?
You know, to me, I'm looking for that corporate connection.
Yeah.
You know, with us all. Boom, you know. That's what I look for, you know.
And I love that perspective you've got of this isn't a pub full of sinners. This is a community of people.
Yeah.
What a different perspective. And I love that because when you go with that attitude, that communicates to people.
Absolutely.
Whatever attitude you have towards them communicates to them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, you know, I wouldn't have had that kind of look. Something happened to me about 10 years or so back where I completely changed the way I looked at people, you know, and that was when I really got a grasp of the gospel and the new covenant and how Jesus looks at people in the pub, you know.
Yeah.
Because I'd have probably gone in there with condemnation or whatever, you know. And people smell that.
Yes.
People know if you're just going in there under duress, you know, I hate the places and I'm just in here to get a few people to say, you know, give their lives to the Lord or whatever. You know, people will smell that. But if you're going in there looking at them as the same as you, you are no more holy than they are, and vice versa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of looking at them on a level.
It's understanding.
You're not better than them.
Yeah, yeah. It's understanding.
I'm afraid that's what can come across sometimes when Christians are doing evangelism in places where they're scalp hunting and they feel that, you know, they've got one up on you, kind of. Or that's what can come across. They might not be thinking that, but that can come across.
It's how people read it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because people read you when you're silent, you know. they can tell the vibes, you know.
Definitely.
Whereas if you're going in there and you're looking at people, you know, like I've had a guy in a bar in one place, you know, that was absolutely out of his brains, you know, and just put my arm around him, you know. It was his birthday and started to sing happy birthday with the rest of the bar, like, and this guy who'd been like really aggressive previously, suddenly his heart was softened. You know? So we carry the touch of the King.
Wow.
You know? That's the touch of the King when we, you know, someone who seems aggressive and all the rest of it, and we connect God's love with them, you know. And that changes their hearts, you know, when they encounter the love of God.
And that's one of your songs, isn't it? That's one of your songs.
Yeah,
that's from the King.
I can't imagine.
There's a battle raging over this land. A deep damage in the people. But pride stops us stretching out our withered hand. God has stretched out to heal us. This I know, this I know, this I know, this I know. Just one touch from the King changes everything. Just one touch from the King changes everything, everything. There's a great darkness over this land, a deep darkness on the people, but a light is shining that the dark can't understand. Light of the world, King Jesus. Do you know? Do you really know him? Do you know? Do you know? Just one touch from the King changes everything. Just one touch from the King changes everything. Oh, land, oh, land, oh, land, oh, land, oh, land. Can't mention it.
Yeah. What's the story behind that song, Godfrey? What brought that to you?
Well, do you know, I can't remember too much.
That's all right.
You know, that was one of the songs from a few years ago that I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy preaching, and I think he mentioned about that.
Right.
And something just hit me. It can often happen that someone will say something and a phrase will just go boom, you know, like the snapshot that I take into the dark room, you know, and that would be one of those, you know. And I had a few versions of it until I got to that night, you know. Right. But yeah, it seemed to go down quite well. You know,
just a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I still sing it, although I kind of theologically have kind of moved on a little bit into a slightly different place.
I try keeping rules and working my head off to please God. I tried opening gates and digging those ancient wells quite a lot, but it wore me out. It just wore me out. So I quit being a lawman so I could be God's man. I stopped all my striving. I've been crucified with Christ. With Christ, we are a new covenant people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, called out of darkness.